I'm a songster, a guitar player. A what? A what? But it never tells you the who. The who you are. And that is going to be really, really important. The Christian education coming from Laterno, in your biblical study stuff, that's critically important. And that's the who. That's the who. You'll always know about the what. If I ask you about you, you're going to tell me the what you are. You're very rarely going to tell me the who you are. Your honesty, your integrity, trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent, for those of you that remember that from Boy Scouts, before Boy Scouts kind of went away. So that's important. I have a little blue ribbon sticker, and I was going to try to bring one for each of you and dogged if I could not find them. But what it basically says, it's a blue ribbon, and it says, who I am makes a difference. Who I am makes a difference. That's really important, I think. The who I am makes a difference, because all of you, well, let's see, how many of you want to do commercial aviation? How many of you are planning to go to FedEx and American Eagle? And, well, how many of you can just fly missions? How many of you don't know what you're going to fly? You didn't raise your hand, so you either dozed off or you're not too sure what you're going to do. All of those are who you are makes a difference. Who I am. Who I am makes a difference. And if you want to put it in the Christian perspective, as I put on Mr. B's card, if you go, who I am makes a difference. I'm not going to write them all out, because who I am makes a difference. You can answer the same question from a Christian perspective as just go, who? I am makes a difference. I am. Okay, we covered the Christian perspective here. Who I am makes a difference. So it's personal and it's theological. It's all rolled into one. That's what we're trying to do here, is amalgam of trivia and fun facts. And I don't even know how much time we have today to do this in. So that's my
At 9:30, they'll walk out.
Okay. Hopefully not before then.
Yeah, if they walk out before then, that'll say something.
So the who I am makes a difference, because those of you that are going into commercial aviation, well, those of you going into any of the aviation fields, the crew resource management thing is vitally important. Now, this is the buzzword around the industry. How will you react? How do you interact? How do you communicate? How do you plan? How do you manage your own life? What's your integrity like? The who I am is really, really important. The interviews that you'll go through are very, very important. The testing you'll go through is very, very important. It's going to show kind of who you are. You've had part of the crew resource management stuff, I think, already, haven't you? About how to listen, how to interject when something's not right. So I'm gonna tell you here. I brought this one. This is the transcript from an aircraft mishap, and this is kind of how a CRM class works. You sit down and you draw straws, and maybe you two will be paired together, or maybe you'll be paired with somebody you've never seen before, and you're going to go through a script in the simulator or a mock-up cockpit of an emergency situation. And one of you will have a card that says something about being contrary or being uncooperative. The other one will have a card that maybe says, I'm going to make the wrong decision, blah, blah, blah. And they want to see, are you going to speak up? Are you going to say anything? Are you going to do it diplomatically? Are you going to be forceful enough? Listen to this transcript. This is the flight engineer. This is it. I won't give you the whole times, but it starts at 4:52 and 22 seconds. Flight engineer says, hey, we got slow airspeed. First officer doesn't say anything about it, but says, check the turn. The captain doesn't say anything about it, says, where's the strobe? The flight engineer says, the strobe's over there. They're looking for a runway in Guantanamo, Cuba. Captain says, where? The first officer says, right inside there, right inside there. Flight engineer says, we're not getting our airspeed back. Just very casual comment. Hey, we're not getting our airspeed back. No one pays any attention to him. Captain says, where's the strobe? You can see where this is going, can't you? Right down there, says the first officer. I still don't see it. First officer says, expletive deleted, we're never going to make this. Captain says, where did you say the strobe was? First officer says, right over there. Captain says, where's the strobe? Do you think we're going to make this as a first officer? Captain says, yeah, if I can catch the strobe. 500 feet, you're in good shape, says the first officer. Hey, keep your airspeed up, says the flight engineer. Flight engineers are really smart. They see everything. Stall warning sounds at 16:54, so they've been dilly-dinking around with this now for 2.5 minutes. The captain says, I got it. First officer says, stall warning, question mark. Flight engineer says, stall warning, exclamation point. Captain says, I got it, back off. Unidentified crew member, max power, there it goes, there it goes. They struck the terrain at 1,400 feet west of the approach of runway 10. The accident occurred in daylight, 19 degrees, 54 minutes north latitude, blah, blah, blah. Serious injury to all 3 crew members, and the aircraft was destroyed. That's the purpose of crew resource management. How could the flight engineer have been more forceful? The flight engineer is going to be causal in this. Blamed as causal. He wasn't flying. He just sitting in the back, pumping electrons and gas. But was not forceful in identifying the situation. Now, what do you think about the personality of the captain? Back off! Would you speak up after the captain told you to back off? Or something more significantly expletive? And that's the gist of what crew resource screening will be when you go for your commercial interview. How are you going to interject the important points, the salient points about that flight? How are you going to get something corrected? What were the errors of the first officer? What were the errors of the captain? So today's news, you've all seen the video of the Russian aircraft hitting the runway. Did you see the bounce? Goodness gracious, this thing went on fire before it hit the runway, but did they dump fuel? Mm-mm. Did they have extra fuel on board? Mm-mm. Did it shift the center of gravity? Probably. And shift the landing weight and shift landing speeds and shift the feel of the aircraft? Possibly. But let me warn you about what I just said. Don't be a Superman. Now, those of you that are all into the Avengers probably don't pay much attention to Superman, but when I was young and had hair, Superman was a big thing because he could leap tall buildings in a single bound. That was the beginning of the TV show. Faster than a speeding bullet, stronger than a locomotive, can leap tall buildings in a single bound. And what accident investigators and pilots and news people do is they leap to conclusions in a single bound. And that becomes the gist of the news story. So every time you hear about aviation stuff, wait until things are really sorted through. Aircraft accidents and investigations are very interesting and very complex. And they're kind of interesting. So, okay, so now let's come to a second question. That's kind of that one. This is an amalgam or kind of a running commentary of just random thoughts. So, and like I said, they're all testable, so you guys really need to get your notebooks out. When do you learn how to fly? Where do you learn how to fly? When and where?
Started ground school, solo.
Where did you learn how to fly? Where and how do you learn how to fly? Either of you two. Jump in.
In my hometown.
Okay. And where do you practice flying?
I've been practicing here.
Practicing here. How about you?
In school here.
In school here. Anybody learn how to fly anywhere else? Where? No, I don't mean like a physical location.
Oh, okay.
Okay, but they all have to do with airports and around airplanes, is that right? All in favor say yes. Raise your hand. Okay, that's where we learn how to fly, right? Wrong. That is not where you learn how to fly. Listen to this. Every day, life gives us free lessons on our drive home, at work, or in our daily interactions with colleagues and family members. By learning how to pull lessons from our daily successes and errors, we quickly improve in all areas of our professional and personal life. What is that really trying to tell us? Well, answer the question because you don't understand it. So I'm going to tell you. What it means is that you don't just learn to fly here at the airport. You learn to fly when you're driving down Estes Parkway. You learn to fly when you're trying to emerge onto I-20. Nobody's letting you on. You learn when you're in the classroom and you're having a disagreement with somebody sitting next to you. You're in a dorm room and somebody ate your Hot Pockets or whatever the case may be. All of those help to dictate how you're going to react in an emergency or a critical situation because that is your training. You're learning. Don't discount the opportunities to improve your professional and personal life by building it into little cubicle boxes that only occur at certain locations. Where do I learn to fly? Oh, when I get out to Abbott Aeronautical Center, I'll go get an airplane and we'll talk about flying. Well, here's something about that. In an emergency situation, you're going to react based on what you've learned, and not just what you learned here. Now, you don't have to raise your hand, but have any of you ever waved at someone on Mulberry or on Estes Parkway with just one finger? Anybody? Have you lost your temper when you're in traffic, or you can't get to class on time? Have you just gotten all wound up and tensed up because things aren't going well? You're trying to get home for Christmas. You can't get to DFW because the road's not good. Well, you know what? That anger that spurs up at that time is exactly the way you're going to react in the aircraft, because emotion processes faster in the brain and the neurosystem than does reasonable, rational thought. And it's going to get in the way of rudder and ailerons neutral, stick up to full gravity bias, whatever your EP procedures happen to be. And if you are not learning from your interactions with other people, and you're in a conflict with the captain or the first officer in the cockpit, now that emotional level gets peaked up. And it's going to keep you from working in a logical, rational way, the way that you've been trained here to say, maintain aircraft control, analyze the situation, take appropriate action, land as soon as conditions permit, or some variation of that theme. Does that make sense? So let's talk one more step. So that's what I'm trying to say right there is your education is taking place each and every moment that you're interacting with other people and when you're interacting with yourself. And it has a direct application to the way that you are going to perform your duties in the cockpit. And more importantly, how you're going to react when things go bad in the cockpit. Either through the crew resource management, or the way you react in the checklist, or the way that you read the checklist, or the way that you put emphasis on the wrong word, which conveys the wrong thing to the person that's trying to figure out what's really going on. So here's a couple of things. We're going to kind of skip here to these things. I think that are important because these are AR's rules to live by. Are you ready? I guess I can write them down. They're not necessarily in any logical order. I hope I spell them right. Be proactive versus reactive. We're going to come back to over these in just a second. The second one is minimize the variables. Okay, the third one is time is the only resource. I wanted to be a doctor. The only thing I passed was poor penmanship. And the last one is understand the concept of points in space. Okay, what do these have to do with flying? When you're getting ready to go launch from Gregg County and go to Oklahoma City and the weather's kind of iffy, don't wait until you're almost Oklahoma City to check the weather. You don't do that, do you? You check the weather before you leave. You check the weight and balance, you do all that kind of stuff. This is very important, this proactive thing. Be actively involved. Does it apply outside of aviation? You're driving to Oklahoma City for Christmas break and the roads are not very good. You're going to cut up through, I don't know, some small town route on the 2-lane roads. You know, do you really stop to look at the weather? No, you look at Oklahoma City and you look at here and you go, well, I can probably make it home. But you're not proactive enough. In the airplane, what this means is I want to be actively involved each moment of the flight. I don't want all of a sudden to have something go that I should have taken care of. T-33s, I used to fly T-33s, and these are airplanes that you'll never see anymore. They're on concrete pedestals in front of the VFW hall, but it flew on gallons. Only military airplane at the time that flew at gallons, but you reset your own counter. If you forgot to reset the fuel counter, you had to wait until the boost pump lights came on to try to calculate how much fuel you had left. And they would bleed off in certain sequences, but in Alaska, if you had moisture in there, sometimes the boost pump circuit would freeze and the boost pump light wouldn't come on. So now you're kind of going, well, I wonder how far we've gone. So you get your map out and you'd measure it because you would burn 1 gallon a mile. So you'd figure out how many miles you'd flown and then you'd calculate how much fuel you had left. Pretty rudimentary way of flying. But you want to be proactive. Try not to be reactive. The way that you try not to be reactive is minimize the variables. Now in the military, we teach traffic patterns a little bit different. We do overhead patterns, 300 knots down initial, go into the 4G break, 150 or 175 knots around the final turn, 155 knots on final touchdown, and 135 knots faster than you've been flying to begin with. Unless you're flying an F-104 and no flap, and then the landing speed's 230 knots. But be that as it may, minimize the variables. So as you're coming down, I'm going to talk to you kind of like because I don't fly light airplanes. I don't have a light airplane license even. I've got 20,000 hours of flying time, and I don't know anything about propellers. I tried to take the introduction to private pilot class here, and Brad Wooten, I think I told you, asked what was the maximum speed below 1,200 feet or something. I told him 560 calibrated, and apparently I was wrong. So minimize the variables. So if you're coming down here and you wanted to be on an altitude, and you want to be on an airspeed, and you want to be on a heading compensating for plus or minus crosswinds, and you wanted to be configured, and you wanted to start the final turn at a point in space to arrive halfway around the final turn at a point in space to arrive on final at a point in space on altitude and on airspeed and proper configuration. You don't want all of these things to go wrong at the same time. So a good rule of thumb is if more than one of these things is wrong, altitude, airspeed, heading, crosswind, configuration, clearance, weather, if you got one of them, that should set off an alarm. A bell. Are we communicating in the cockpit? We're not. That's a warning sign. And we got a couple of these out of whack. Then even though I'm just up here starting at the brake and I'm not going to land until over here, I may already start to think about going around. I don't want to wait until right here to think about going around. Because if things are not working out, be proactive. Be ready to do something different. You don't have to land. I know you got 157 people in the back and they want to make their flight and they got to get to the next gate and they got to go through security and they got to get their bags. They want to get to their next flight. They want to go through security and they want to get their bags. If you wrap that airplane up at the end of the runway, it makes it real hard for them to do that. So if one of these gets out of whack, you got your airspeed, you got your heading, you got your configuration, you're only correcting your altitude. So all you have to do is make a pitch change, make a little power change, get back on altitude, and you're ready to follow these points in space. Let's go to points in space for a moment. Points in space. You understand what points in space are so that you can work around points in space. ILS approach. So we're coming in we're descending and we're coming in, we get down to our vector altitude and we're coming in, we're trying to find the outer marker, final approach fix, and we're going to do our descent. We're going to have a beautiful flare. We're going to touch down. ATC starts us down too late or starts us down too early. That changes our point in space. You got to start recalculating. Don't just sit there. Now we want to be proactive again. What is this going to do? What is this going to do to my fuel flow? What is this going to do to my heading? What is this going to do to my vector? What is this going to do to my time? How do I start preparing now to get leveled off? What do I have to do? Can I maintain greater speed then in the descent? If I'm not speed restricted, can I try to get back to this point to be on altitude, airspeed, heading control configuration with currents to land? When do I start my descent? When am I going to make my decision to go around? Are you going to wait until you absolutely are right at minimums and at final approach airspeed at a descending configuration to make your decision to go around? Or are you going to start thinking about it out here, being proactive, working against the point in space? I realize this is getting a little convoluted. They're very simple. But I'm going to come back here just for a second on this descent rate. ILS approach. Any of y'all flying instruments right now, or have you been flying instruments? Okay, instrument guys. ILS. Descent rate on final. Give me a rate. What do you think? 300 feet per minute. Okay, so you like that, 300 feet per minute. We'll use that. When do you practice the ILS final approach to get 300 feet per minute? So when are you gonna get your proficiency at doing 300 feet per minute? How many opportunities have you had in order to do an ILS at 300 feet per minute descent?
Like exact, or
I don't know.
I mean, I don't know. Most of them.
Whatever your descent rate is, where do you practice it? Work with me. Huh?
In the simulator?
In the sim, that's a good
Okay,
one.
yeah.
Okay, where else?
In the airplane, like on the ILS.
On the ILS. How many would go with those two? In the simulator or on the ILS? Everybody? Wrong answer. You wasted all of this back here, not necessarily at 300 feet, but all of this back here trying to get to the ILS final approach course requires a decision to make a descent rate that's controlled, requires a change in pitch, a change in power, an adjustment in heading, whatever it needs to be. But most of the time out here we waste that space.
You know, Hondo 4-1 descend from 5,000 to 44,000 feet. Be there by 10 miles east of Hondo 85 marker black map.
We all just make this blind power change, pitch change. We get down there with no thought to what we've just wasted, which is a great educational tool. So why don't you be a little bit more proactive and say, oh, I'm 10 miles from the Hondo fix. I'm 2,000 feet above. Let me see if I can set up a descent rate of math, angle of blah, blah, cosine. Okay, 250 feet per minute. That would give me, yeah. And now you're flying. You're not just a passenger in here. Because you're proactive, you're not reactive, you're minimizing the variables because you're in control of your descent rate, you're understanding the concept of points in space to be to your advantage, and I'm just saying that that's a really good way to learn how to do things. And the last thing that you've got, as far as I'm concerned, in this situation, is time is the only resource. It's dictated by fuel, number one. You can't stay there forever. You can't go train or freeze and just hang in the air. So time is the only resource, but time is the only resource doesn't just have to do with flying the airplane. It has to do with the reaction in the airplane. How much time do you have to accomplish the boldface? How much time do you have to get into the checklist? How much of the checklist do you have to read? Is there a possibility that you can skip forward because you are so well versed on the airplane that you can move ahead of the page? You know, if you look at Sully's accident, mishap. Accident is a misnomer. Mishap. When they land, the back of the airplane starts to sink. Do you know why the back of the airplane starts to sink? Because they never got to the point in the checklist to close the outflow valves from the APU. Because there wasn't enough time. So they're going through the checklist, do, which was all well and good if you're going to land on land, kind of, but in ditching, it's not one that you normally do. Well, down here was close the APU door. Because the APU sits back in the tail, and that's where the vent door is. Now, here's an aside. You're all keeping up on the Boeing 737 MAX issue. I mean, I'm a 737 guy, 727, 737 guy. My captain rating is in the 737. Nowhere close to the 800. We still had steam gauges back in those days. It was coal-fired. But be that as it may, the funny thing about the APU door, in the 727, there was a boldface about closing the APU door, or not closing the APU door until 10 seconds after the APU had been shut down. This was a big deal. It was in every flight manual at FedEx. Wait 10 seconds. Why? Well, you gotta let the APU cool. We have a permanently opened APU door on the 727. There isn't a door. It's a screen. But when they did the manuals, all of that just translated over. They put stuff in that wasn't there anymore. Well, in the Boeing 737, if you have a stabilator problem, and in the 757 and in the 767, if the stab goofs up, what do? In the stab, you break the stab by slamming the yoke against the direction that the nose is going. Nose going up, slam it forward. Nose going down, slam it back. But you probably read that was disabled in the 737-800 MAX. So those guys over in Indonesia were going bam, 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 doing what they've been trained to do because they flew the older 737s. So you got to watch when you're going through all your training, be a little bit proactive in the way that you read things, because sometimes things get goofed up. Information doesn't get conveyed the way it should. These things, if you didn't remember anything else from today, I would be honored if you would try to remember those. They made it through a 35-year career for me. They were taught to me by a Southeast Asia returning guy that was my instructor when I was going through pilot training. And every time we would debrief a ride, that was the rules that we'd go through. Kind of like, okay, what did you get behind on? How many of you are going to be flight instructors? Anybody? Let's talk about flight instructors for just a half a second. If you go out on a sortie, this is AR's thought on it, maybe not commonly shared by anyone else here at Laterno, so I apologize. If you come back to the debrief and say, hey, I knew you were going to do that. I knew you didn't understand how to do the spin prevent, and you screwed it up. Whose fault is that? Yours. You're right. It's your fault. Did you pre-brief it? Did you go over it? Did you assign that as a study topic the day before? Did you reinforce it before you went out on the flight? If not, that failure is yours as an instructor. That's my own personal opinion. Your responsibility is to be able to know what's required in each flight segment and be able to convey that properly to the student. Now, let's caveat that, because there's a caveat to that. Anybody that comes to you to learn to fly, for the most part, there are some people that can't fly because they can't. They just can't. But for the most part, the people that come to you to learn how to fly have the potential to get their private pilot's license. But, and here's the one you can write down. This is on Mr. B's test, by the way. They won't learn it the same way or in the same day. So if you've got only one spiel on how to do spin prevents, it ain't going to work for everybody, because it's just not going to make any sense. And you've gone through that already in high school, or maybe classes here. taken trig, algebra, calculus, Mr. B0 course. I took it without ever having algebra. It was very interesting. Took multiple explanations, but you've been up, you've talked to your instructors, go, I didn't understand what you just said. Or you've talked to your classmates, go, what in the heck was he talking about? It took somebody else's explanation. By the same token, if you're sitting in front of your instructor or your student and you're saying, okay, when you do the sprint prevent, just put just this much rudder in, just enough. Well, how much is that? How much rudder do you put in a sprint prevent?
Enough to stop. Yeah.
Well, how much is that? I want to
Look
know
outside.
but how much is that?
2 inches.
Come on, you got it. What is it? How much?
I mean, it's different every time.
Key operative word, feels like it's different. Have you ever had one of the instructors here sit down? I'm going to go off camera here for a second. Stick your foot up. Like you're on the rudder. Like you're on the rudder. Okay. On the rudder. How much pressure? We're going to spin prevent.
So those down there, right?
Okay, is that the pressure? Is that the pressure you feel? Is that the pressure you feel right there? Are you sure? You're absolutely positive.
That's it, so.
You certainly, okay. Let's see if your pressure's the same as his pressure. Of course, he's got bigger boots.
Oh, no.
Okay, same thing. All right, let's go. Tell me. That it? That's what it feels like? Okay, just a minute. We can go over here. Let's see if we get a consensus. Oh, you got your hands in your pockets. Come on.
I've never actually done it.
Okay. You got it? Okay, we're going to tell you in just a minute what it's going to be. Okay? Yep. It's a little harder than the other two. I think that was the right pressure for you. Put yourself, imagine it, put yourself in the airplane here, be mentally involved in the airplane. You can feel it right now. You know what it looks like. We got guys sit next to you, okay, we're doing the spin prevent. Don't forget, go through your procedures. Watch it, okay, now it's time to put the rudder in, put it in. Guess what? You've got almost the same pressure now that they have. You're the rudders now. There you go. Not a lot. That's what these three have said, that's what the pressure is. But it's a lot different because a lot of you, and I am this way, I'm a tactile learner. I'm not a book learner. If you can show me how to do the loop, let me feel it, I can learn it. A lot of times the book doesn't make any sense. A lot of times the explanation doesn't make any sense. Don't be afraid, even though we're in a politically correct environment now, that when you have the opportunity to demonstrate tactilely, touch, feel, pressure, it will save you a lot of time, I promise. And the student will react a little bit more because now they know what they're looking for. Otherwise, you're just sitting there, they're going, builds apprehension. Apprehension kills concentration. Also makes you nauseated and get sick. Bill Gardner was my T-37 instructor at spins. I hate spins. I detest spins. But I can tell you that this guy was a screamer. Bill Gardner was a screamer. He hollered all the time. You're not doing this right. You're not doing that right. You're not doing it. And in a T-37, the flying dog whistle, I don't think we have them anymore. We would do clearing turns from about 5,000 feet and say, you'd go just wing up and wing up and wing up as you descended down to enter the traffic pattern in the Ox Field. Well, I can guarantee you, I threw up every time we did clearing turns, and he would holler and he would grab my mask and shake it and go, "You're an idiot, you're a jerk, you'll never be a military pilot, blah, blah, blah." Well, that really didn't help my concentration much either. But I got him one day because the nose is coming up, we're going to do spins. And I was very apprehensive because we had done a couple spins and he wanted to do one more. And I felt it just about the time the aircraft broke and started to go left. I dropped my mask going, and it hangs right there. And Bill Gardner is sitting right here. And as the airplane spun, we went. And Bill Gardner has stuff all over his face, all over his mask. And Bill Gardner never hollered at me in spins, ever again. But he never flew with me again. But I got a kinder, gentler instructor after that. All right, let's see. Let's talk real quick about, when you go to Delta or you go to Federal Express, you're going to take a test. It's a written test. Not part of the interview process per se. Well, it's part of the interview process, but it's not where you sit down with the guys and gals that are interviewing to see if you will fit into their culture. Give you a couple quick questions off of the Delta test. You guys aren't participating over here, so we're going to come right over here to you. You can do the alphabet without singing the alphabet song, I assume. What's the only non-letter in the alphabet?
And
And what does that stand for? What is it?
The ampersand.
Ampersand. A little and symbol. It is part of the alphabet, by the way. We just don't teach it that way. W, X, Y, and ampersand. That's a question. Hold on to that one. You'll see that one again. What's the first name of Dracula? Vlad. Vlad the Impaler. All right. Vlad the Impaler. Why? Yeah, count. This one's kind of funny. The question was, the question on the test is, why is that funny? Huh? Come on, you guys don't read Reader's Digest? Words to Ponder, Word Power in the back of Reader's Digest? No, that's an old person magazine. I'm not going to read that. It's not in Rolling Stone. It's not going to do that. Eschew obfuscation, you know what it means? Do away with confusing verbiage. So that was on the Delta test. Why is this funny? Why is that the phrase eschew obfuscation funny? What is the difference between a solar day and a sidereal day? This was on the FedEx test. I had no earthly idea. I didn't know what a sidereal day was. S-I-D-E-R-E-A-L, sidereal day. A sidereal day is the amount of... A solar day is we go around the sun. The sidereal day is rotating on the axis in front of the vernal equinox or an star or an astrological, and it is 4.6 seconds less. So the question was, what's the difference between a solar day and a sidereal day? And it gave you some multiple choices, one of which is it's shorter. Well, okay. So what's the purpose of this test?
trivia question?
Pardon?
Know your trivia.
Yeah, no, you're true. How smart? What kind of guys and gals do you think they would hire at the airline? The ones that score really the high. So if we have a test scale here, and here's 100%, and here's Texas Aggies, or University of Colorado for me because I went to Colorado State. Anyway, you think they'd hire these guys that got thousands of flight hours, lots of experience, and they do well on the test? All in favor of hiring those guys, raise your hand. Yeah, there's a little skepticism here. Now, if you score 100%, it doesn't matter what your background is, the chance of getting hired is probably slim and none. You want to be in the core of the testing curve, and here's why. Because they find out that you have a little bit more as far as personality is concerned. You interact with people a little bit better. You have more diverse background I already talked about. You have multiple interests. People that score over here have a smaller interest range, and they're highly, highly motivated and probably function within their own realm of reality. They would be very strong, very difficult captains to argue with, to try to convince that they were wrong or something else needed to be done. That's not what you want in the crew force. Back here's the guys, no matter what you say, they go, nah, I don't know. Airspeed, nah, we got some, you know. So we don't want that either. You want to be in the core. But the other purpose of this test is that when you don't get hired, because the test is so strange in the way it's configured. Matter of fact, one of the questions was, we have a house with 110 outlets, dual 110 outlets, and one 220 outlet. What's the total ohm load in the home? I have no idea. Yeah, it's kind of like Fahrenheit. You know what Fahrenheit is? Yeah, it's the height of 1 Fahrenheit. It's stupid, I'm sorry. But because this test is so diverse, if you do not get hired, what can you say? I didn't do well on the test. It's designed to give you an out. It's designed not to crush you. It's designed to give you a positive out so that you can go apply somewhere else and not feel like a failure, because everyone that comes out of the test goes, holy moly, I don't know what a sidereal day was, and what's an ohm? Or what was a skew obfuscation? So everybody had something in there that they didn't understand. So if they could have really bombed the interview, but we don't want to bomb the personal relationship thing. So this is kind of designed to give you an out. It's a no harm, no foul kind of thing. Some of the guys that got up in here that didn't get hired at FedEx, which surprised me, astronauts. I mean, an astronaut, come on, man. But because of the nature of their training and what they do, the psychiatrists and psychologists would say they will not be happy in this environment because of the way that they have been trained and the way that they do things. They will have a tough time acclimating to the environment, and will probably be captains that would be very difficult for a young second officer or a young first officer to challenge if the airspeed was low, or if we had a boost pump light, or if the weather was down, or we really don't want to shoot the approach. Now, one thing about commercial aviation, you think that by the time guys get to commercial aviation, guys and gals, I use guys in a generic way. Please don't send me to the police. I'm going to lose my train of thought. You'd think that they're at the postgraduate level of aviation. Would you assume that? I mean, you'd think, God, they got thousands of hours. They got experience out. They're strange. They're just as strange as when they were brand new students. We can tell you some of the stories. They're not important, but they will do things that you would not expect. I used to ride with a guy going to Oklahoma City, and Oklahoma City has a runway, goes north-south, and out here on the highway, this is, I can't remember the highway, but there's a truck stop right here, Texaco truck stop. It's got a big sign. Texaco. Probably spelled it wrong. So we're coming from Memphis this way. Fog, sleet, gloom of night, clouds. As long as Mark could find the Texaco sign, he would make a turn to final. Below minimums? Probably. Could you convince him not to do that? No. You know why? Because he lives over here. And he's going home. We're going to the hotel. He's going home. Invariably, if you rode with Mark, and we'd always have to tell the young second officers, speak up. He's not gonna, but speak up. Be forceful. Sir, we can't do that. We're below minimum. Sir, we can't do that. We don't have the visibility. Sir, we can't do that. But he had this habit of, in the 727, he'd been in it for multiple thousands of hours. And he would fly it the way he wanted to fly it. You're going to ride with some people that are pretty strange. Okay. Hey, did you know everybody in this room knows something you don't?
There's a lot of people out there that listen.
But you know a lot of stuff they don't. Not of any value, but it's just other stuff. Okay, we did that. We did the emotion is faster to move cognition, action than it is to logical thought. Hey, what would you feel about this comment? This is way off base, but I'm just curious. People are never illogical or irrational. People are never illogical or irrational. Never illogical and never irrational. What do you think? All in favor say aye.
Depends on your perspective.
Tap dancing in the back row. Let's just take it at face value. They're never illogical or irrational. Any takers? It's true, but with a caveat. To themselves. The caveat is to themselves. So if the captain is going this type of thing, and you're going, that is illogical, that's irrational, it's illegal, the weather, the fog, the gloom of night, it's not illogical, it's not irrational to him. It makes perfect sense. That's what you're fighting against in the CRM world. In that person's mind that's making that decision, it makes perfect sense. So you've got to gear yourself to be safe, to save yourself. Okay, we did the thing. You're more important than what you are. Makes a difference who you are, blah, blah, blah. Social media, I think I did mention this one in the big one. How many of you got social media? Facebook, Twitter, Twerk, well, I don't know any of this stuff. I have a number 2 pencil, so one of the things that you're going to have to sign at FedEx and American and Delta is you have to provide them with a list of all your social media accounts along with your password. And if you want to screw up an interview real quick, if you got those pictures from South Padre Island from last year or whatever, don't have those. Because they have a whole department that is going to sit down and they're going to scope through your social media if you're in the finals to be hired. And it is a termination offense in the first year if they find a social media account in your name that you did not declare. I'm not a social media person. I've never Facebooked. I have no earthly idea how this stuff works. But it's a big thing. Now, it may change over the next couple of years because you all, your generation, and generations coming behind you are so in tune with that. But they are looking for things that would be, in case you did have a mishap, something that the media can jump on, something that will disparage the professionalism of the airline. Yeah, so you don't want to do that. So be very, very careful about what you're putting out. By the way, don't share your answers to that test on social media. We did that at FedEx. We had a spate of about 3 classes where everybody was scoring 85 or 90 and above. And it turned out that when they got out, they were quickly writing down the questions and emailing them to their buds that had interviews later on in the month or months, and the test scores went up. And it was an anomaly, and it stood out real quickly. None of the guys got hired, which was really too bad to waste that. Don't be a Superman, blah, blah, blah. Hey, how many new causes to aircraft accidents are there? How many do you think? I mean, we've got all this stuff evolving. We got all this new technology. So how many new causes? Pardon? None. It's the human interface. 737 MAX. Let's go back to that one for a half of a second. So they tried the yoke. They tried the emergency action guide, emergency response checklist, and they had at the right on the center console the solution to their problem. But most of the time, solutions to problems like that are either with red guarded switches or with black and yellow warning tape to say, hey, don't fiddle with this unless you really want to play with it. There's a military designation or aphorism that says, don't fiddle with the red guarded switches. Don't break the safety wire just to see if there's a switch under there. Don't play with the red guarded switch unless you really need it. But that stabilizer disconnect switch sits right in front of the throttles, and all they had to do was lift the guard and trip the switch. Would have fixed the problem, apparently. Which a jump seating captain knew on the way inbound and helped the previous flight crew solve the pitch problem by disengaging that, but apparently didn't pass the word on to anybody else. So a new crew took that airplane the next day and very quickly experienced an issue. So let's digress for just a moment. Don't just pay attention to the red guarded switches when you're learning all your cockpit layout. Look at what other switches do. You need to understand how the systems work. One of the toughest jobs at UPS used to be becoming a flight engineer. When he first got hired at UPS, being a flight engineer, because the DC-8 was a nightmare as far as plumbing was concerned, as far as fuel movement and electrons and oxygen and pressurization. I think you had to pump the gas into another. I don't know how it worked. I didn't ever work there, but the DC-8 was apparently just awful. And in order to pass the flight engineer's harassment at almost all the major airlines, you had to be able to sit down and during your ground eval sketch out the fuel system with the boost pumps and the electrical load, blah, 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 blah. The environmentals with the pressurization and the offset differential pressures. The electrical system, which was a nightmare. You got 4 generators running around, watts, ohms, volts, et cetera, what all the little warning lights meant, when they would come on, what the sequence was for the fuels. And that was an outgrowth from how complicated the airplanes used to be. Well, now the airplanes are getting more complicated again because there's so much artificial intelligence going into them. So you need to be up on that. There's a saying that says, the more you know, the less you fear. The more you know, the less you fear. I could maybe go with that to a certain extent, but if you tie that into routine, that becomes a problem. And because in aviation we spend so much time doing the same thing over and over and over again, I can tell you from personal experience on the 727, I've walked out and done a second officer's panel check, which includes all of the overhead panels for the front seaters, because Lord knows they get dumber when they get up front. But you have to help them to, besides bring the coffee, that's the important thing, you bring the coffee pot up. And then you do the engineer's panel, and then you do the walk around of the airplane. I can honestly tell you that every once in a while when you're doing 3 legs in the night or 4 legs in the night, you'll all of a sudden go back out there and go, I forgot to do the walk around as you're passing 10,000 feet. Fortunately, we don't put gear pins in, so it was not a big deal. But you just, because you do it so often, you can fill in the blanks. Have you ever filled in the blanks? I think we talked about this at the chapel, about the stop signs. Did we do that? Has it happened to you since? Have you done anything stupid because of routine? You will, I promise. We're going to go to questions here in just a minute because I'm going to run out of stuff and you're getting tired of listening. But this is the hardest part of the self-realization because of becoming the pilot. Other people will know whether you are a good pilot or a bad pilot. The question is, do you know if you're a good pilot or a bad pilot? Do you know who you are morally and ethically? Do you know who you are? And so we always say use the mirror test, because when you look in the mirror, it's you looking at you. You're not trying to be somebody to somebody else. It's just you. And the decisions that you make in the cockpit, just as the decisions you make in life, affect other people's lives. You're going to find out that you were not nice to somebody in high school. Usually it's guys not being nice to girls, but girls are not nice to guys. And it bothers. People carry that. I mean, you carry that into reunions 30 years later. People are going, you hurt my feelings terribly. Well, you'd be surprised. So you have a responsibility to other people. You're going to be a commercial pilot carrying passengers, you got a responsibility to 300 people. You make a stupid decision, you are making the decision for their life. So I would expect that as you make those decisions, you are fully prepared to make those types of decisions, and you're not making them on an emotional level. So what I want you to do right now is look around the room. I mean, you know these folks. They've been around class with you for a while. And this is the question. We're going to fly and approach. We're going to go to the Aleutian chain up outside Alaska. We're going out to Cold Bay. Cold Bay has horrendous crosswinds. It's way out in the middle of nowhere. So here's Alaska kind of sitting here, and here's the Aleutian chain, and out here in the middle of nowhere on the Bering Strait is Cold Bay. Horrendous crosswinds. Crosswinds get so fast out here that if they're going straight down the runway, there are pictures of the old Army guys in DC-3s hovering over the overrun because they have enough wind coming this way that they can almost hover in the overrun by going that way because enough lift. So we're going to go out there, and the weather is right at minimums. We're cleared to 100 feet and a quarter. 100 and a quarter. It's overcast from 15,000 feet down. Light rime. Winds, crosswinds are going to be 22 knots, and the RCR is 11. Well, no. Let's get a good RCR. What kind of a low RCR number do you want? Runway condition, ice. It's slick. So we got a crosswind. We're going down to 100 and a quarter, and the run-in rabbits lights. The 2,000-foot run-in rabbit light is out. It has an ILS. It does not have a GPS approach. It's out of service. RNAV approach is out of service. We've decided we have to get there. We've gone through all of this stuff. We've looked at the weather. We've figured out where we can divert to. We've minimized all the variables. We're on approach. We're on configuration. We're talking to the right guys. We've got a little bit of time to think about it in the descent. We know where we want to be on the approach. Now what I want you to do is look around. And who in here would you want to be your captain? It's a two-person aircraft, just the two of you. Nobody else there, just the two of you. Take a second here. I want you to come up with, you're not going to tell me, but look around the room. Look around. I want you to really look around the room and look at everybody in here. Who would you want to be your captain on this? Who's got the reputation right now as far as the school is concerned and as far as the integrity and what you know about them because you interact with these folks on campus? You know them better than the instructors do. You know them better than the staff does. You got somebody in mind? Got somebody in mind? Did you pick them just because they're your buddy, or did you pick them because you respect them? Okay, so we got who we want. Now I want you to look around the room, and who would you absolutely not want to be in that situation with? You don't want to be breaking 100 and a quarter minimums on a low RCR with crosswinds. You know that they're in a program. You know that they're good folks. You know that they're trying hard, but for whatever reason, you don't want to be in that situation with them. So look around the room. See, you got anybody? Got anybody in mind? It may be somebody that's not in the room right now. Somebody else that's in the program that you may know could fit the category for the want or the not want. I can tell by expression some people have got some folks in mind. Can ask Mr. B. Mr. B, in your assessment of everybody, do you have someone that would fit the want and the no way category that you know in this program? Are there people that you would fit in that category? Now you hold up the mirror and go, which one are you? Which one are you? Which category are you in? Did your buds pick you to be the want person? Or are you the don't? Oh man. Oh man, I don't know. I don't know if I really want to be in that situation with him or her. There are people, when you go to your commercial carriers, that fit in those categories. There are people that you won't want to fly with, but that's the way the schedule works. You can drop the trip, but you can't put a do not fly list. They used to have a do not fly list. You could request, put people's name on the list and say, please do not pair me with this person. If I bid this line, skip me to the next line. Well, the lawyer said you can't do that because it hurts people's feelings. Actually, the lawyer said you can't do that because if there was ever a mishap and that list ever came out and that person's name showed up on a whole bunch of people's lists, the airline would be having to answer a lot of questions about why was that person on that list? Why didn't you do something about them? Why didn't you give them more standards checks? Why didn't you give them more SIM checks? Why didn't you give them more training? Airlines do not like liability. So now we have, oh, I would like to fly with lists. I would like to fly with this person. No one uses those lists anymore. The do not fly lists were very popular. Okay, this is a hodgepodge thing. Hopefully something caught for you. Because it ties to the last question of, do you know what the two saddest days in a pilot's or educator's life happen to be? Do you know what they are? The day you don't know it's your last flight, and the day it is your last flight. Or the day you don't know it'll be the last time you get a chance to lecture, and it is the last time you'll lecture. When Mr. B leaves, I probably never have the opportunity to talk to a class again. I want to thank you for your time and attention. I love being over to talk to you guys. I wish I could just make a DVD or whatever it is that would be new, cassette tape. VHS. Like my granddaughter brought the record out and wanted to know what that CD played on. It was on a record player. Yeah, so, but it would be really rewarding to be able to just download 35 years of experience of mistakes and successes and say, here, look, here's something to consider. But it doesn't happen. The last piece of advice is when you're hanging around the crew room and you're listening to, and any of you, if you go military, this is definitely true. If there's a bunch of people talking over here and one of them is really loud and bragging, go somewhere else. Find the folks that are sitting in the corner reading, that you've flown with, that will talk, that will tell you the real unemotional how-tos, and that will be your key to aviation success, whether you're flying civilian, instructing military or commercial aviation. I don't think I had anything else. Air shows. You want to watch air shows? Most people will ask me this. People say, "Who's your favorite air demonstration team?" And you would think that I'm going to say, absolutely wrong. Absolutely wrong. If you want to watch something really cool, go on internet or Google and Google British Red Arrows. They fly a 9-ship formation. They do a thing called a continuous rollback maneuver with a 5-ship. I think they're doing it now with a 6-ship. So they got here's the leader, and then they got 2 and 2 and 2. And what happens is these two, all of a sudden, they're flying along, and all of a sudden they go up. And they do a barrel roll, and they join back here. And the minute they get in, the next 2 guys go and do a barrel roll around the formation and tuck back in. And then the next guys. There's constant moving, constant action. It is so cool. So if you want to see something really neat. Okay, any questions, comments, additions, corrections, anything you want to cuss or discuss, or any questions you want to answer I didn't ask?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So the Bible says that if you even commit a sin to somebody in your heart or in your mind, if you think, certain things about somebody, that's like murder, right? In certain ways. But how do you balance thinking about these things of who would I trust blind with, and trying to keep your heart and mind clean.
I think if you go through the thought process with the right heart, I mean, this is going to be kind of a multi-salty, sugary answer. If you go through it with the right heart, you'll have the right answer. And it may, on the airline, it may cost you. You may have to drop a trip. You may be somebody that you just can't live with because of the way they talk. That they are a profanity-laced, dirty, story, misogynist pig of a person. And you just have to go, I need to drop that trip, or trip trade. And it won't do you any good to confront. It won't do you any good to argue. You have to be yourself. And if you are of the habit of sitting in the right seat during a lull of a gate change at Southwest and the crew is loaded and you've got everything done, you're waiting for passengers to load, and you pull out your Bible and start to read it, and you know that that person's going to say something, it's your heart. It's your heart is how you're going to have to do it. I don't know, Mr. B, you got a good answer? It's tough. It's tough.
I'm glad she asked that one to you.
My theology degree expired along with my medical degree and my engineering degree. It's tough. I don't know. There is one thing one thing about Bible study. I'll mention this is just kind of an aside. Bible studies are a lot of fun to me. I do not have the knowledge that Mr. B has, but we're always involved in Bible studies where people say interesting things. And so one of them was lust. Let's go with lust for a minute, because that's the one that's most often commented on. If you have lust in your heart, you have committed lust. No. But you have to go back into the Old Testament to find out what lust really meant. Sometimes we spend so much time in the New Testament, we forget to go back to find out what the colloquial words meant back then. And lust was a lot more forceful, a lot more overt, a lot more penetrating than just, she looks really good in that bikini. That may not constitute lust. It may be not a good thing to do and not a good thing to say, and certainly don't tell your wife, wow, that girl looks really good in that bikini. It really doesn't look. But this was a lot more. And so sometimes when we ask a question like that, you kind of got to go, okay, let me see if we're asking it where the foundation comes from for the question. And it really doesn't matter, it's what's in your heart. Anything else? Not philosophically or religiously.
Who is God?
Hey, he's the captain. Enjoy it. Enjoy every moment of it. You will be surprised. Old guys told me this when I was young. You will be surprised how fast it goes. You will be absolutely surprised how fast life accelerates, and it accelerates. And there will be a last. When you're in high school, everything is new. Everything is coming. Everything is going. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to be an airline pilot. I'm going to have 2.5 kids. I'm going to. Statistically, I don't know what they have. It has something to do with Solomon. But anyway, there's an end, as Mr. B is about to find out. That all of this is a memory. So live each day with a positive attitude, because today is tomorrow's memory. Do what you can to be upright. Trust with the loyal elf for Frank Cruz County Beach, your very free road. Because it'll be a memory. It will go fast. And then you're standing here going, what am I going to do today? I'm going to go bother a bunch of kids that are kind of going, oh man, he's old. This stuff doesn't make any sense. It will make sense. It will make sense. These 4 points will make sense. And I absolutely guarantee, and I will buy you dinner if it doesn't happen to at least half of you, that about halfway through your aviation career, you're going to all of a sudden go, oh yeah, Okay, I see it now. I see how it works. That's all I got. Thanks. Have a great day. God bless you. All right, sir.
You are the last class. This is the last class that you have.
Is it really?
This is it.
Well, you guys had a great instructor. You're a great guy.
Thank you all. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Have a great, what is this? Is this spring? Have a great break.
Thank you, Mr. B.
Thank you all.